Tonight's presentation is quite interesting. It's by Ed Kroft, and I'll give you a little bit of Ed Kroft's intro. Ed, as you know, is a lawyer. He's Queen's Counsel. He's a fellow of the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada. Ed is currently an international level judge and president of the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada. Ed lives in Vancouver and has collected stamps for over 50 years. He's the past president of the Society of Israel Philatelists and has been actively involved with that society for many years. Ed has written many articles for various philatelic publications relating to philately of the Holy Land and has successfully exhibited at the regional, national, and international levels. In 2012, Ed was the winner of the Regal Award of the SIP, which is the Society of Israel Philatelists, for outstanding contributions to the Holy Land philately. Ed was also the 2013 Geldart Medal awarded by the RPSC and the 2017 winner of the Jennings Award from the American Association of Philatelic Exhibitors. In 2020, Ed was the recipient of the Dick Stein Award of the SIP for outstanding philatelic writing and research. Ed is a member of many societies, including the APS, AAPE, RPSC, SIP, American Philatelic Congress, the Postal History Society. Sorry, I misread that. The American Philatelic Congress and Postal History Society, the Postal History Society of Canada, and of course the PSSC, BNAPS, and ONEPS, the Collectors Club of New York, and the Holy Land Philatelic Society. His interests include the postal history of the Holy Land, the Middle East, Canada, and era philately. Ed's presentation this evening is some uncommon destinations for mail sent from Palestine, December 1917 to May 1948. Ed, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for those kind remarks. And as Ken mentioned, the topic is about uncommon destinations. And this is a fun topic. It's a fun topic because we get to go over our history and geography and go all around the world in the time that I'm going to spend with you. So I've put a schematic of a nice colorful map up because we're going to be in many of these places throughout the time that I'm speaking. And this is going to deal with outbound mail out of Palestine during British occupation, which lasted roughly December 1917 through May 1948. So you're going to see all sorts of covers that you might say, I wish they were in my collection, because you collect the countries to which the mail was sent. And without ado, I'm going to get into the scope of the presentation. As I mentioned, it's enjoyable because there's a huge challenge factor here. As you'll see when I go through the presentation, finding some of the destinations to which this mail was sent was a lot of fun. And I always marvel when I see something on eBay or in an auction or see it in some dealer's box and go, you know, one man's garbage is another person's treasure, because I find that destination that I don't have. And there are many that I still don't have, notwithstanding what you're going to see. So the driver in the presentation is the destination. And you're going to see covers that are surface mail. You're going to see covers that went by air. I'll explain some rates as we go along. But one of the drivers for me in this was thinking about how some of the mail that we're going to see ever survived, given some of the destinations to which the mail was sent. So think about that when you get into some, quotes, postage stamp destinations, as you know, in the tax trade, we call them, you know, places where, you know, people haven't heard of the names of the countries and they're really, really small. So these uncommon destinations might be sovereign states in their own right. They might be colonies, they might be protectorates, territories, or possessions of sovereign states. And as a lawyer, I'm interested in the legal designations as well. for reasons that I'm going to come and talk about. Now, for your benefit, if you don't already know this, during the period of British occupation, there was both military and civil administration. There was the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, which occupied Palestine during World War I in 1917, mid to late 1917. After the British were successful, they established the Occupied Enemy Territory Administration. And ultimately, with the conclusion of the San Remo Treaty, the League of Nations awarded a mandate of the territory to Great Britain. So when we're looking at the mail that we're going to see a lot of, you have to remember that the mail really was traveling from a country that was under a UK mandate to countries that were also under either sovereign states in their own rights or were possessions or territories of other countries that were sovereign states. And all the countries that we're going to be looking at were members of the Universal Postal Union. So you might be saying to yourself, geez, who's administering the mail in the Ascension Islands? Who's administering the mail in Tahiti? And you go, oh, that's France, or it's the UK, or whoever it is. And so it's really mail that we're going to be looking at between UPU members. Now, when I titled this talk, people said to me, why are you using the word uncommon? Why aren't you using different words? Exotic, rare, scarce, unique, weird, unusual, because those adjectives might also be suitable for looking at some of the mail that we're going to be considering. But I chose the word uncommon because it was relatively neutral. It wasn't quite judgmental. And how I got to uncommon is because I'm saying it was uncommon because of factors such as geographic location or the size of the population, which was living in the jurisdiction to which the mail was sent. So for purposes of this presentation, I've categorized something as uncommon if it was a cover that was sent from Palestine by air, by land, by sea, to a destination, and it was seldom sent throughout the period or at some points during the relevant period of roughly 31 years. It was uncommon or unusual for it to be sent at that particular point in time. And it's best to look at examples in order to best understand what I'm talking about. Whenever I do a presentation, I always salute the people who came before me, or alternatively, people who were of an assist during the presentation preparation. And I acknowledge different philatelists around the world who collect in this area or collect related material. And I dedicate this presentation to an extraordinary philatelist who sadly passed away at a fairly young age, Dr. Les Bard, who, for those of you in the Philately area, you'll be familiar with Les. He was a tremendous researcher and scholar, and his articles really helped to advance airmail, particularly in the area of Holy Land airmail. Did a lot of rate studies. So I dedicate this presentation to him because his exhibits on airmail and to various unusual destinations was outstanding. So first I'm going to start in the Middle East. And you'll see me use maps in this presentation, just in case you forget where things are, or you once knew and you don't remember anymore, or you're not sure. So, and I know this is going to happen because I got 50 smart people in this meeting. And I know people are going to debate with me one way or the other. Well, Ed, is that really in Europe? Is that really in North America? Is that really in Asia? So we can have that debate another time. But let's just assume that I've characterized things in the appropriate continent appropriately, just for purposes of the dialogue. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Aden. And you go, Aden? Where's Aden? Well, some of you know South Yemen. And there's Aden down in the Gulf of Aden on the way up the Red Sea. and that was a British crown colony. This comes back to my international characterizations of things. So here's a cover that was sent from Jerusalem to Aden back in 1937, and it has 15 mils of postage, which was a the surface air mail rate. You'll see a receiving cancel on the back for Aden camp. Not a very usual destination. You'll see it went from Palestine and it's going to what they called Arabia. Another cover going to Aden, but this is an airmail cover in 1938. And I should mention to you, that in the course of the 31 years of British occupation, there were different stamps of Palestine that were used by people who sent mail in that period of time. And what I would suggest to you is I'm going to identify them. These stamps that you see on the cover are known as pictorials. They were issued as of 1927. Prior to that, there were stamps called typograph stamps. And prior to that, there were stamps called the blues. So there were 3 different sets of stamps that were issued during the Palestine period. But this is airmail, and this is going to Aden. And a lot of the covers I'm going to show you today are commercial covers. And this particular piece, for those of you who are familiar with Philately or rate studies, this was a cover that was sent under the All Empire regime, where mail sent from Canada throughout the empire or to points in the empire, or from the UK to points in the empire, had a fixed airmail rate. And you'll see it on the slide, which is slide 12, that it's 10 mils per 10 grams. So it was a fixed rate, basically lasting until the commencement of World War II. Now we get to the next country, Bahrain. And looking at it from a satellite, that's where Bahrain is. If you don't know where Bahrain is. And at the time, it was a UK protectorate. And now you're seeing my distinctions: colony, territory, protectorate. Some of you will say, what's the difference between all of these things? And it's the degree of administration and government involvement by the owning country, by the colonizing country, whether or not in international law it was a protectorate or a territory or a colony. Now, here's a cover that was censored going from Haifa to Bahrain, to Awali in the Bahrain island. You'll see the pictorial stamps. 25 mils was the rate to Bahrain. And this went by KLM. So there were different airlines flying out of Palestine to different places, one of which was KLM, the Dutch airlines. And there's the censorship marking out of Palestine that's on the cover. On the back of the cover, there were transit markings and receipt markings as well. Palestine to Iraq, known as Mesopotamia, which was under the UK administration at the time. Now, some of you will say, well, isn't Iraq fairly close to Palestine? So why was it an uncommon destination? Well, at the time that this cover was sent by airmail, early airmail, 1923. And the reason it's important is it's an early example of the RAF's Transdesert Air Service to Iraq. So surface mail was reasonably common to Iraq, but airmail, frankly, was not. And there were surcharges for airmail at the time. And the stamps you're seeing on this cover are what we call typograph stamps. So I said there's the blues, which was the first issue, the typographs were the second issue, and the third issue were the pictorials that we've already seen. And these stamps, the typograph stamps, were overprinted Palestine, during this period of time. You'll see it in the middle of the stamp, and you'll see it sans serif, you'll see it with serif. There were different printings in London and Jerusalem of those overprints. But the notable point about this cover, going to Iraq from Jaffa, it was a sub post office in Jaffa in Palestine, is the airmail transit marking and actually methodology of transit. Now, here's a cover going to Lebanon, Syria. You tell me. because who is it addressed to? Beirut, Syria. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was in school, I always thought that Beirut was in Lebanon, and I always thought that Syria was Syria. So somebody was hedging their bets here, and they sent it to Beirut, Syria. Now, why would they have done that? Well, at one time, the area of Palestine was also known as and part of an area called Greater Syria, which also included current-day Lebanon. So this is a cover that is franked with stamps that are the pictorial stamps, amounting to 15 mils, which was the surface letter rate. But as I tell you on the slide, that this really went to Lebanon. And how do I know that? Because if you look at the back stamp and you look at the Arabic, and you also look at the top here, albeit that it's not in great shape, it went to Beirut in Lebanon. Oops, sorry about that. So my bottom line on this one, I keep doing that, sorry. Whoops. The bottom line on this is Lebanon actually became an independent country in 1943, but at the time it was under the French mandate. Here's a cover actually going to Lebanon after it became independent. And I mentioned before when it became independent. So unlike the first cover, which was going to a French mandate country, this is going to Lebanon, which became a sovereign state. And it's a beautiful postal history cover. I always say that because it's got lots of stuff crossed out, lots of stuff, lots of cancels, lots of ladder boxes telling me that somebody can't be found in about 10 different places. You know, that's why they're scratching it out and everything else. But the bottom line on this one is this is surface mail, 35 mils with pictorial stamps. It's going from a very popular destination in Palestine called Bethlehem, which all of you know where that is. And it's registered in Bethlehem. It's going to Tripoli in Lebanon. And you see all of the different transit markings, registration postmarks on the back in Bethlehem. And there was a large population of Arab-speaking folks in Bethlehem. And that's why you see that. You'll also see, obviously it was going to Lebanon as well. And that's why you'll see some of the Arabic there as well. And on the covers, we're going to see in the next while, you're going to see English, you're going to see Hebrew, you're going to see Arabic, you're going to see a whole bunch of languages. Here's a very unusual cover going to Saudi Arabia from Palestine. And this has pictorial stamps on it, sent in 1947. It was registered in the smaller town of Ramleh, which has been in the news recently because some of the riots that were in the region, most recently, given the conflict in the Middle East that's going on currently. But this is 1947 going to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, for the longest time, has not let or did not let mail from Israel get to Saudi Arabia. And so before the state of Israel was declared on May 14th, 1948, mail was still going from Palestine to Saudi Arabia, and this is a fairly rare example of that. So we've left the Middle East, and now we're going to North America. Now, for those of you who are looking at North America, you're going to see Mexico, the United States, Canada. Oh, and you're going to see something over on the left side, and you're going to say, Hawaii. Hawaii's part of North America? Well, that's what this map said. And I like this map, so I put it down, and I'm going to stick by that. So the first thing I'm going to show you is Palestine to Alaska. And you'll say, Alaska? Oh yeah, it's 1938. Alaska wasn't a state of the United States. So this is the postcard rate going to Gambell, Alaska, not a necessarily common destination from Palestine, but there were some tourists sending a nice note back to friends back in Gambell, Alaska. Here's a cover that I wrote about in a couple of journals. It's the only reported cover from Palestine to Canada in 1918. I say it's the only reported cover. It's going from Jerusalem to Prince Rupert, British Columbia. And there's the receiving mark on the back going to Prince Rupert. It's from Jerusalem. It has the Jerusalem postmark. It has the Palestine censor marks, and it's going to Prince Rupert, BC. I haven't got a clue how this cover ever got there, other than the fact it went by boat. It went probably by the Grand Trunk Railway across Canada, all the way up to Prince George. But the reason I tell you that these kinds of this cover is highly unusual is because there was a ban on mail from Canada to Palestine and from Palestine to Canada until British occupation occurred. And that was late 1917, but some of the postal guides in Canada indicated that mail service only commenced in mid-1918. So it's very difficult to find a cover from Canada to Palestine or from Palestine to Canada in 1918, especially early 1918, mid-1918. North America, moving on to Hawaii. Remember, Hawaii wasn't a state in 1921. And this is a cover that is franked with the foreign letter rate typograph stamps. You'll see Palestine has been embossed, once again, overprinted on these typograph stamps. And it's going to Maui. For those of you who've been to Maui, I'm sure you love it or you have loved it. But this is from Haifa. This is a skeletal postmark from Haifa in 1921. Here's a postcard going from Palestine with a pictorial stamp to Oahu, the main island. I shouldn't say the big island, but the main island to Oahu, to Honolulu, so to speak. Well, it's going to Manoa. But what's so interesting about this postcard that went from Jerusalem in 1935, it actually has a receiving cancel in Hawaii from Palestine. And Christmas greetings from Jerusalem. We enjoyed New Zealand and Australia very much. We're going on to Africa soon. And I was going to say it should have been signed people who aren't working or people who are retired and have lots of time on their hands, because it would have been a long way to go to all these places, between Palestine, New Zealand, Australia, Africa. Fantastic. Here's another cover from Jerusalem to Honolulu. And what's interesting about this, there's the typograph stamps. It's the appropriate foreign surface rate that existed. It was censored. Interestingly, the cover went via the United States. It was probably a bit closer to go the other way from Palestine over to Hawaii, but it went through the United States. And if you look at the date, July 17th, 1941, we're getting close to Pearl Harbor. Obviously, Pearl Harbor was December 1941. So this probably arrived in August, but it's one of those pieces that's just a nice piece going to Hawaii. Palestine to Mexico, to Monterrey, censored over on the right side, written in Arabic. Obviously, it's been addressed in English. It went via New York, and it went on the Clipper, which meant that it went a long way around in August of 1941, because there were all sorts of blockades as a result of World War II. And the postage, which consists of pictorial stamps, is very, very high, 165 mils, including registration of 15. So it's 150 mils to Mexico, and the rate was very high because it really went around the world. It went from Palestine through New Zealand, across the Pacific, over to the United States, over across the United States to New York, and then down to Mexico. So this cover traveled a long way, and it's not surprised it looks like it was beaten up. Now we're going to move to Europe, out of North America. And once again, you might take issue with these countries in Europe. Are they in Europe? Are they in Asia? Where are they? But let's look at them. First one, Palestine to the Aegean Islands, Haifa to Rhodes, 1937. And you've got a back stamp, a receiving back stamp arrival, So it took roughly 2 months to get there. It went by airmail, and I showed you KLM before. This is Alitalia, the Italian airline, going out of Rome. There were many covers that were sent by a philatelist, Bayer, and they were sent posta restante. Who knows if it was really picked up in Rhodes in the Aegean Islands, but there were a number of these kinds of covers that exist, and they're called Bayer covers. And you'll see Bayer's return address on the back of the cover in Rome. Palestine to Albania, sent by a stamp dealer, Judas Berdugo, up in the top left corner, registered out of Tiberias. Nice transit markings on the back going through Bari, Italy, through the railway station, and ultimately finding their way to Durazzo, in Albania. What's nice about the cover? Beautiful pictorial stamps. And this is dated June of 1927. The pictorial stamps came in July of 27. I called them pictorial stamps. These are the typograph stamps. So I said to you, there were the typograph stamps followed by the pictorial stamps, but that is the correct postage. And it's 4 piastra. And so it paid for registration and it paid for extra weight. So it's triple weight, beautiful cover. Palestine to the Free State of Danzig, the Free State. Danzig was an independent city-state. It was a sovereign state at that time. For those of you who collect Poland, Germany, and Danzig, of course, is now the city of Gdansk in Poland. But this went not by KLM, not by Alitalia, it went by LOT, which was the Polish airline that had a service to Palestine at the time, registered out of Tel Aviv, and this paid the appropriate airmail and registration rate. Registration was 13. The airmail rate to Danzig at the time was 50. Palestine to Estonia, Haifa to Tallinn, proper postcard rate 1938. Again, Palestine to Estonia. This is Tel Aviv to Tallinn. Very nice parcel card with very, very extensive pictorial postage. Beautiful insured label, valeur déclarée at the time. You don't always find that with certain parcels. Transit through Göteborg, in Sweden, and receiving cancel on the back of the parcel card in Tallinn. And the date of this is December of 1939, and it arrives in February of 1940. The reason I'm showing the Tallinn pieces and Estonia is because the Nazis and the Russians both went into Estonia and got rid of a whole bunch of the population. So finding mail from Palestine to Estonia is not an easy task in the circumstances. Palestine to Finland, registered mail out of a small place called Petah Tikva, going to Helsinki, pictorial stamps in the circumstances, 5 times weight, commercial cover, going to a business in Helsinki, plus the registration at the time. Palestine to Greece. Some of you will say, well, Greece is pretty close and that must be common. Well, this is going to a little place in Greece called the island of Chios, 1944. Return to sender. You say, why? Well, the Nazis left in October of 1944, and then there was a Greek civil war. So is it any surprise that the mail was returned in the circumstances that they couldn't either find the person or alternatively there was no service? And attached to the postcard was this label, which I found. And essentially, the person who underlined these things, it says, please inform sender accordingly with an exclamation. And it scolds the writer that things must be short. Well, how much can you put on a postcard? So I thought it was just very interesting to see this label attached to a postcard in the circumstances. Another piece from Palestine to Greece, a great deal of postage, registered, and it was 7 times weight, beautiful transit markings on the back through Cairo, arrival postmark in Athens. The reason I put this cover in as distinct from the first one that's after Nazi occupation at the beginning of the Greek Civil War. And this is after the Civil War ended. And there are no warnings. There's nothing else. Beautiful transit markings, beautiful commercial mail. Here's an unusual one, Palestine to Iceland. You know, a postcard with a typograph stamp out of Tiberias on the Sea of Galilee. That is a proper, beautiful picture of Tiberias. And it got to Iceland, and then someone readdressed it to Denmark because they probably thought it wasn't exotic enough. You know, it goes to Iceland, it goes to Denmark. Why don't we send it other places around the world? And what's interesting about this card is that it bore the printed matter rate of 3 mils rather than the foreign postcard rate. And you were able to pay the printed matter rate when there was very little writing on the postcard. There were only a few words. So I gather the person who was taking the postcard at the post office judged that the writing was so little that it could bear the lower postal rate. Another piece to Iceland, but as opposed to this piece, which had the typograph stamp, this one has the pictorial stamps. And it's 1947 going to Reykjavik. There was a designation or cachet on the cover indicating that there was insufficient postage. So this is a great cover because in the top right corner was what the person first posted, which was 55 mils. It was said to be insufficient. So the next day, that person put another 5 on. It was postmarked the next day. So it was the 13th, and then it was postmarked the 14th of February. And you see that on Palestine mail in certain circumstances. So the rate was 60 rather than 55, and it was there was remedial action taken at the post office. Palestine to the Irish Free State. Beautiful, beautiful registered cover with typographical stamps, transit markings through London, transit markings in Palestine, another registration notation in London. Ken, you'll always like to see, different designations on English mail, based on things that you collect. But this is a nice registered cover out of Sarafand. There's the label, there's the skeletal postmark. So in these circumstances, the unusual nature was it was going to Dublin. And this is the earliest known recorded date out of Palestine to the Irish Free State, which at the time was a sovereign state, going to London. And here's another piece, 10 years later, roughly 11 years later, it's airmail this time, going from Haifa to Trinity College in Dublin out of Jerusalem, transiting Haifa, which is the postmark on the back. And for those of you who can't remember, the Free State in Ireland ended on December 29th, 1937. So the two pieces I've shown you are Irish Free State mail. Now we go to the Isle of Man, and we're going to visit that. You see the little speck on the map. It looks really big, but it's really a little speck. And here's a piece, lovely piece in wartime, going to the internment camp from Palestine to the Isle of Man, 60 mil rate, plus 15 registration, censored in Palestine, censored when it gets through the Isle of Man in England, 1941, Tel Aviv to Port St. Mary. Isle of Wight from Palestine. Some of you will remember the Isle of Wight for the great rock concert that occurred there in 1970, but there was actually mail that went there from Palestine. Here's a great postcard, 1918, with a typograph stamp. By the way, if you haven't noticed, this one was not overprinted. This one, first the typograph stamps came out in 1918 without Palestine overprints in Hebrew and in Arabic. This one, to begin with, did not have any overprints. And where's it going? It's going to the Isle of Wight in England, censored over on the left side, souvenir of Jerusalem visit, 2210, 1918. This was an army post office. GM1 in Palestine. Then, years later, Isle of Wight again, airmail cover from Palestine with pictorial stamps from Jerusalem to the Isle of Wight to Ryde. And in this case, it was triple weight airmail rather than single weight. And who's flying the letter? Imperial Airways, which did a lot of the transit from England to various places, including Palestine. Probably one of my most favorite covers. Who's it going to? Benito Mussolini. Is it a real cover? Is it historic? Is it philatelic? Well, it's going on KLM out of Jaffa, and it's postmarked with the appropriate postage for single airmail rate. But this is real, because for those of you who didn't know, there were factions in Palestine at the time. The Mufti of Jerusalem, Husseini, was working with Hitler and Mussolini to try to upset the British organization in Palestine around 1936 and beyond. So this was sent out of Jaffa to Sua Altezza, His Highness Benito Mussolini in Rome, in Italy, received 1936. And I only wonder what was in that airmail envelope sent by Khalil Janho out of Jaffa. Palestine to Liechtenstein, which to Vaduz, 1947, it was a sovereign state. And this is registered airmail, 60 mils for 10 grams rate, plus 15 registration. Very nice, colorful pictorial stamps to Liechtenstein. Palestine to Luxembourg, pictorial stamps. And this is 1946. But what's noteworthy for those of you who collect this is you'll see the airmail etiquette is crossed with double bars, indicating that it transited London. And it was Jusqua, it's a Jusqua marking to London, and then by land or by surface to Luxembourg out of London. But it went air to from Palestine to Luxembourg. Palestine to Malta. And you say, this is on His Majesty's service, and it's going by airmail, but it's got postage on it, and it's going to a gentleman named Sir Harry Luke. And Harry Luke was a civil servant, a British civil servant, as you'll see on the left side of the slide in my descriptions, who served in various places in colonial offices. And it's wonderful to find Luke mail. And you're in this presentation, I'm going to show you different pieces in very exotic places addressed to Harry Luke. Because where did he work? Barbados, Cyprus, Sierra Leone, Malta, Fiji. And you're going to see some interesting mail nonetheless. So this is the rate to Malta. Palestine to Monaco by air. And this is the appropriate airmail rate. It transited Paris on the way to Monaco. Palestine to Northern Ireland. In this case, it's 1941, the appropriate airmail rate to the United Kingdom. In that case, the back flap showed it came from Gaza, censored because it's wartime, and it was going to, it was out of a military unit or to a military person in this case. Palestine to Northern Ireland again, going to Belfast, 1942. The reason I put a second cover in, it's going to police headquarters. It was sent from police headquarters in Haifa to the BBC in Belfast. And it's registered, correct postage. And what I wanted to show is that the rate changed from the first cover in 1941 to the one in 1942. So there were rate changes going on all the time, but I'm showing you two different commercial covers. Palestine to Norway, Jerusalem to Bergen, postcard with the appropriate airmail postcard rate. There was flight on Alitalia, KLM, and this postcard was redirected from Norway to Germany. because there's the markings going to Hamburg. And there you see the postmark at the Amsterdam Central Station in this particular case. So it transited from Norway through Amsterdam, then to Hamburg. Palestine to Portugal. These are the typograph stamps. It's going from the famous city of Jericho to Lisbon. Not often do you see a lot of mail from Palestine to Portugal. This is 1927, appropriate postcard rate. Palestine to Portugal with pictorial stamps, registered 1947. In this particular case, oversized envelope, and it's 14 times weight in this particular case. That's why you see so much postage, which was 365 mils. And mils, M-I-L-S, was typically the denomination of the currency that was being used. Palestine to Spain, 1927. The typograph stamps are still being used at the time. Really, it's the end of the usages of the typograph stamps because the pictorial stamps came in 1927, but it's Tel Aviv to Madrid and then forwarded on elsewhere within Spain, receiving cancel on the back. Later, pictorial stamps, not typograph stamps, being used from Palestine to Spain, in this case, Barcelona. But what you see is the designation, the onward air transmission marking that went through London. So the mail went from Palestine to London on to Spain. And there's the censorship in this particular case in Spain in the circumstances, because we're still within the wartime period in 1945. Palestine to the Shetland Islands. And just if you forgot where they were, except on a sweater you might have, then here's the Shetland Islands way up here above the Orkney Islands. And it's Palestine addressed to the Shetland Islands. I mentioned the all-up airmail rate. This is the 10 mil fixed airmail rate, the all England all empire rate that was being used. Palestine to the USSR. A lot of you will say, oh, the USSR must have been a reasonably common destination. It's hard to find a lot of mail because some of the mail from Palestine to the USSR got destroyed for a variety of reasons. This is a registered letter from Tel Aviv to Moscow with receiving cancel on the back. There's the Tel Aviv postmark. But what's so interesting about this cover? Mixed franking. Holy Land collectors, just like other collectors, love mixed franking. So this is the pictorial stamps that we've got here, the blue ones, and then we've got two typograph stamps to make up the appropriate postage in the circumstances. And here's another great cover. Palestine to Latvia through the USSR. Latvia was part of the USSR. And there's and what date is it? August 22, 1945. The Soviets arrived. They had occupied Azerbaijan, and the British had left. The Americans had left. And so there's the Riga cancel in Latvia. And you'll also see an Iranian double circle censor mark, because mail would go through Iran on the way to or from the USSR. In this case, the letter was being returned. It wasn't reclaimed. So that's why you see so many different markings between censorship markings, return markings, not claimed markings. And there's a Russian cachet as well that's on there, dealing with the fact that the letter has to be returned. Palestine to the Vatican. Some of you will say, well, that must have been very common. Well, remember, the Vatican wasn't established as a city-state until the Lateran Treaty in February of 1929. So this is a pre-1929 piece to the Vatican. 1924, with a typograph stamp, postmarked in Rome, because there wasn't a Vatican state at the time. And so it's addressed to Rome, but it's actually going to the Vatican. There's the address. So when you're looking for pre-1929 mail from the Holy Land to the Vatican, then you really have to really scrutinize things in order to find stuff, as opposed to post-1929. Palestine to Wales, part of the United Kingdom, going to Cardiff, 1947, pictorial stamps. Palestine to the Kingdom of the Serbs, the Croats, and the Slovenes. How many of you have got mail to that address? And that's where it's going on the postcard, going to Belgrade. And of course, a lot of you will say, well, isn't that Yugoslavia? But it didn't become Yugoslavia until October 3rd, 1929. So the mail, which is reflected on this postcard with a pictorial stamp, is going to the Kingdom of the Serbs, the Croats, and the Slovenes, which was a sovereign state in and of itself at the time. So we've left Europe, and now we're going to Africa. And as a kid, I loved maps like this. Beautiful map of Africa with so many countries I couldn't keep track of. So we're going to see a lot of them now. Palestine to Algeria, a French territory going to Iran. Pictorial stamp, proper postcard rate. Actually, it was printed matter rate rather than postcard rate in these circumstances. Palestine to Algeria with pictorial stamps. And how's it flying? On Ala Littoria with a censorship mark registered in Haifa. Now we're going to go to Basutoland. And some of you will say, where's that? Well, here it is on the map in case you forgot. And here's a cover going from Palestine in May of 1945 from one of the field post offices in Palestine, registered to Basutoland, South Africa. And for those of you who forget, Basutoland, current day Lesotho. Palestine to the Belgian Congo, 1945, Philatelic exhibition. Very, very nice postage. It was a postcard from the exhibition. There was an embossed stamp on it for the appropriate postcard rate. It was uprated in the circumstances with pictorial stamps. It was sent registered to Leopoldville in the Belgian Congo. Palestine to Eritrea, to the British base in Asmara in 1948 in January, goes by airmail. Back to the map. So what have we seen so far? We've seen a bunch of places up in Algeria, for example, and we've seen Eritrea, and we've seen other places. Here's Ethiopia. Now, before we saw something going to Mussolini. Well, who's this one going to? His Majesty, the King and Emperor of Ethiopia in Addis Ababa. And who's that? Haile Selassie this is going to. And you see the local script on the letter. You see it went by airmail, appropriate rate with registration of 15, going from Jerusalem to Ethiopia, 1944. So we're talking wartime mail that's going across Africa. And that would be likely BOAC at the time carrying that mail. Palestine to the French Cameroons, mandate period, or mandate mail, pardon me. Jericho to Cameroon, West Africa, very nice arrival marks. There's the Jericho postmark, pictorial stamp, surface rate, and there are the transit markings down at the bottom. Again, Palestine to the French Cameroons, but it's 1945, more postage. That's the surface rate, censored on the side, arrival marking on the back, French Cameroon, West Africa, coming out of Palestine. And then French Equatorial Africa, of which French Cameroon was a part, 1942. And you see the censorship markings. We're obviously in wartime here, coming out of Jerusalem. 5 different countries censored this mail, if you look at the different censorship markings. And there's a transit marking through Nigeria. In this case, it's going to the AEF, Africa Equatoriale Française, You know, that's so very nice cover, as ratty as it might look, you know, in the circumstances. Palestine to the Ivory Coast, to Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire in West Africa. And for those of you who had forgotten, the Allies had returned French West Africa to the French in 1942. So this is a post-Vichy government cover for the Ivory Coast, or going to the Ivory Coast, with 65 mils for the regular rate plus 15 for the airmail rate. Palestine to Kenya, which was a UK Crown colony and protectorate, going to Mombasa. There's the censorship tape. And what country is censoring this? Egypt. So this is going from Palestine, from Tel Aviv, through Egypt, down Africa, to Barclays Bank in Africa. Palestine to Madagascar, not your usual destination for a cover out of Palestine. It's returned to sender, but it's 1947, written in French in these cases, and there's the pictorial stamps for the appropriate rate, airmail rate in the circumstances. Palestine to Mauritius, and there's Mauritius sitting out there in the Indian Ocean off of Madagascar. And why was mail going to this UK Crown colony? Because the British had an internment camp in Mauritius, to which they moved various persons from Palestine. So there was Post Office Box 1000 was the internment address for the camp. And you see transit through Cairo, you see censorship tape, you see censorship markings in the case, and that surface rate, 1942. Then you see a later cover in 1944 going from Haifa to Mauritius, censorship tape, censorship markings, and the rate in this case is double what the rate was initially. But again, going to Port Louis to the post office box in that case. Palestine to Morocco, another beautiful postal history cover. Pictorial stamps, registered, censored, going to Morocco. They can't find the person. And they've got the word unknown here a couple of times. They send it to Marrakesh. They can't find the guy there. So, and for all we know, and based on what the cover says, it was going to a French legionnaire, you know. And for those of you who have watched the movie Casablanca, I don't know if it was going to Claude Rains, you know, in this particular case. But there it is, in this case, pictorial cover to Morocco. Now there's French West Africa. You see all the different countries. We've already been to the Ivory Coast. We've already been to some other places. Where else can we go? Oh, let's go to Zinder in Niger. And there's the AOF marking. Again, the Africa Occidentale Française, you know. So, and there it's coming out of where? Nazareth. Postcard rate, a long postcard from Nazareth to Zinder. Back to your map, we've seen Niger, and we've seen the Cameroons, and we've seen the Belgian Congo, we've seen Madagascar, whole bunch of other places. What else are we going to see? Palestine to Nigeria with typograph stamps going to Calabar, but it's redirected over to Opobo in Nigeria. And look at the receiving cancel in 1923, the Calabar receiving cancel, the transit cancel, and there's a Port Said transit marking through Egypt. Another Nigeria cover to Itu, southern Nigeria, with pictorial stamps, an airmail cover, 1936. Now we're going to Nyasaland, which was a UK protectorate, and that's Malawi in current day terms. And there's pictorial stamps, there's censorship markings, there's a cachet which says there wasn't enough postage put on, but somehow it got to travel by airmail on Ala Litoria, or at worst, it went by surface rate in the circumstances. Portuguese East Africa. What's that? Because at the time, it was just a Portuguese colony. Mozambique. It's your dream. Palestine to Mozambique. How excited was I to find this? Not very common, coming from Jerusalem. Censorship tape on the end, censorship marking, going by airmail. 1939, beginning of the war, September the 7th. September 1, the war started. Northern Rhodesia, UK Protectorate, going to Livingston, airmail, censorship tape, censorship markings, 1943, written in Polish, as people were located in different places. Current day, Zambia. Southern Rhodesia, current day, Zimbabwe. Going to Salisbury, censorship tape, registration, registration postmarks, pictorial stamps, OAS, so it's going OAS, and yet there's lots of postage, and it's not just paying registration. This is actually full postage going abroad, even though it's OAS. Now we're going to move from Africa over into the Atlantic Ocean, and I kept this in Africa because we're going to go to St. Helena. So for those of you who are British colony collectors, you like St. Helena. Here are pictorial stamps that are overprinted for the foreign letter rate going to the island of St. Helena out of Palestine, out of Haifa, and a receiving cancel in 1921 in St. Helena. Very nice. And then we're going to go to the Ascension Islands, which was a dependency of St. Helena. And when I was a kid and we used to study the explorers, it seemed that Bartholomew Diaz and all these other explorers were coming out of Spain and Portugal and going through St. Helena and the Ascension Islands. So wasn't it fun to find this? Going to number 10 bungalow on the Ascension Islands in the southern Atlantic Ocean. And I thought to myself, how many bungalows were there on the Ascension Islands? But this was paying the correct rate to the Ascension Islands with a receiving cancel in all likelihood. In that particular case, beautiful penmanship on the cover, 1929 out of Palestine. Palestine to Sierra Leone, typograph stamp. Oh, look who it's addressed to, Harry Luke. Remember I told you that Harry Luke was in different places? We saw him in Malta. By the way, for those of you who are interested in Harry Luke, big article in Wikipedia on Harry Luke and on his career in the British service. So there's something going to the Colonial Secretary of Sierra Leone, Harry Luke. Arrival cancel in Freetown in Sierra Leone. So we've seen different countries in Africa. Here's another Sierra Leone cover, 1947 airmail to Sierra Leone to Freetown with double weight going on KLM, not on Imperial or what was subsequently BOAC. It's going by KLM. Third cover to Sierra Leone. This one, it's interesting. It's going, it says by Imperial Airways. I probably should have put this one earlier. This is 1939, pictorial stamps. It's after the war has started. And so there's some censorship markings, Egyptian and Palestine, no arrival marking on the back. Palestine to the Sudan. Sudan was pretty close to Palestine. And what do you find on this one? 1939, the airmail etiquette. Oh, it's not really an etiquette. The airmail designation was wiped out by double bars, indicating it likely went surface. In this case, the postage was the all-up rate, if I can put it that way. It was a UK protectorate. It went by Imperial Airways. So nice cover, which you ordinarily might just pass over in a dealer's box. Palestine to the Sudan. The other one was to the Sudan. This one's to the Sudan. 1941, postage is much more. This went by airmail in this particular case. Commercial cover going to Sudan Railways. Palestine to Tanganyika, to Dar es Salaam, now Tanzania. And this is going by airmail, censorship on the side, censorship markings down below, Egyptian censorship. A lot of, by the way, a lot of censorship for Palestine was done in Egypt throughout the period. Palestine to Tripolitania. Tripolitania? Oh yeah, that ultimately became Libya. And that was a former Italian colony. It comes from a military field post office in Palestine, censored, going to MEF, the Middle Eastern Forces. Palestine to Tunisia. Not pictorial stamps, typograph stamps, various transit markings through Egypt, Cairo, Alexandria, and an arrival postmark in Tunisia. EPC, for those of you who've seen it on covers, that stands for Egyptian Postal Censor. That's usually what you'd see on some covers. Great cover. Palestine to Tunisia, when it was a French protectorate. It was postmarked in Tel Aviv in November of 1941, and the franking was 15, which was representing just a surface letter. You know what the problem was in this case? It was supposed to go to Tunisia, but there was a blockade in the north, in the Mediterranean, because at the time, Germans and Italians controlled the Mediterranean coast between Cairo and Tunis. So they sent the letter to Lisbon. And then 2 years later, they tried to find the guy in Tunisia, and then he left. So then they had to actually go and return it back to Palestine. So that's why you see all the different markings, because you'd wonder, how did this get to Lisbon in the circumstances when it was on its way to Tunisia? And the third Tunisian cover that I have is a very interesting one. The French consulate in Palestine in May of 1948 created its own stamps. They overprinted French stamps with the legend or the line Jerusalem with 20 mils, which was the airmail rate to various places. So this is going to Tunis, in May of 1948. Palestine to Uganda, to Entebbe, that famous place that became known in later history. Idi Amin made that place very well known later on, but this is an airmail cover in 1935. Here is Palestine to Zanzibar, now Tanzania, but East Africa, cover Imperial Airways going to Tanzania. Palestine now moves to the West Indies. And I love this map because it's got all sorts of great stuff on it. It's got a pirate. It's got a parrot. It's got a boat. And chances are this map wasn't one that existed in 1948 or earlier. But nonetheless, it's got a whole bunch of Caribbean islands in the West Indies, and I thought I'd use it. Palestine to the Bahamas. Commercial cover, nice cover. Royal Bank of Canada in Nassau. Look at all that postage, registered. So this is commercial out of Jerusalem, business mail, and double weight cover to Nassau. Palestine to Barbados. It went by air to Barbados. And you know what the problem was? Look at the bottom of the cover. It says it's going to Hastings, Barbados, and yet it says missent to the Bahamas. And they went Barbados, Bahamas, who cares? It starts with a B. We'll get it somewhere in the area. Here's another cover to the Barbados, actually getting to the Barbados, with pictorial stamps, heavier postage. This transited typically through the UK, New York, Miami. So it went from Palestine up to the UK, down to New York, down to Miami, and into the Caribbean. Palestine to Cuba, to Havana. Registered, lots of postage on this, censored. This was double weight to Havana. Palestine to Curacao in the Dutch West Indies. Lots and lots of beautiful postage. Commercial letter out of Haifa, out of Holland Bank Union Haifa office to the general management of the Holland Bank in Curacao, which, as you'll see on my title, was a Dutch colony at the time. Palestine to the Dominican Republic, 1947, going on BSAA, the airline, and there was a settlement colony of immigrants who had left Germany, Jewish immigrants and other places. So this was going to the Sosua settlement in the Dominican Republic with typograph stamps. And then on the other side of the island in Haiti, there was a letter that was going to Port-au-Prince. So we had the Dominican Republic on one side, we had Haiti on the other side of that big island. Jerusalem to Port-au-Prince going on the airline BSAA in 1947. Palestine to Jamaica to Kingston, registered going by the Clipper service. So this went all the way around the world. That's why you've got so much postage on it. We're in 1940 in this case. And there were blockades, obviously, because Italy blocked the Mediterranean because they came into the war. So they had to use the Clipper route across the Pacific, across North America, all the way to Jamaica. Palestine to the St. Kitts Crown Colony in the British West Indies. Commercial mail going to Barclays Bank. Nice, 1943, you see a receiving cancel. Palestine to St. Lucia in the British West Indies. To Castries, double weight, 1943. This, once again, likely went the Atlantic route. So it went across West Africa to Brazil, up through Trinidad, Miami, to get to St. Lucia. Then we go to St. Thomas in the US Virgin Islands. And there it is on the map. And here's a cover to St. Thomas from Jerusalem, 1945. It was a US territory at the time. Palestine to Trinidad, the British West Indies, Port of Spain, registered, censored, pictorial stamps, airmail, going across, likely across Africa at the time. Well, actually, it wasn't. It was going a bit differently at the time. It was 1941. This went BOAC to South Africa and then across the ocean to London and then over across the Atlantic to Trinidad. Palestine to South America. Here's the best one of the night. You figure it out for me. It's Palestine to Argentina. What? Who's it addressed to? Providence, Rhode Island? It's got pictorial stamps on it. How does it get to Buenos Aires on the back of the cover? And the only thing I can figure out is the post person who got the mail thought it was R.A. Republic Argentina. Republica Argentina, because how the heck did it get to Buenos Aires on the back when it looks like it's addressed to 63 Empire Street in Providence, Rhode Island? You figure that one out with me. A 1924 mystery. Palestine to Bolivia. Not a very common destination. Censorship markings, airmail, 1939. Another one of my favorites, Palestine to British Guiana. Postcard rate, Army Post Office cancel out of Jerusalem. The nice thing about it, receiving cancel January 4th, 1919 in Georgetown in British Guiana. Later, another cover to Georgetown, British Guiana. Unlike the first cover, which had the typograph stamp on it, these have the pictorial stamps, and we're in the middle of the war, so we've got censorship tape on both sides from different censors. It says it's written in English and Jewish. Now, there is no language that's called Jewish. There is a language called Yiddish, which is a mixture of Hebrew and German. So, but that's what it says on the letter. Airmail, carried by PAA, carried by BOAC, goes through right across Africa, across the ocean, ends up in Miami, and then gets down to South America. Very interesting cover, December 1917. Jerusalem was captured by General Allenby of the Egyptian Expeditionary Forces on December the 9th, 1917. And you'll see famous pictures of Allenby walking through the Jaffa Gate into Jerusalem, not on his horse, but getting off of his horse and walking into the city, showing respect for the city. The mail service opened up on December 17th, 1917. So this is the first reported date and cover out of Jerusalem in December of 1917. And where's it going? Santiago, Chile, in the case. Why are there no stamps on it? Because the British gave a concession to civilians to be able to send civilian mail post-free for 2 months from December 1917 until February 1918. And that's why you see no stamps on this stampless cover. Palestine to Colombia, airmail, pictorial stamps, 1938. Palestine to Ecuador, out of Haifa to Ecuador, pictorial stamps. 1945, through West Africa, on BOAC, through Miami, down to South America. Palestine to Paraguay, to Asuncion, to the Italian minister. Pictorial stamps, lots of postage, registered. Palestine to Peru, to Lima, lots of postage, censored, airmail, going in the war years, 1944. Palestine to Suriname, or Dutch Guiana, as you may also know it. Lots of postage, censorship, 1943 through the war. Another one, Palestine to Suriname after the war, or at the cusp of the ending of the war, censored in Suriname. You'll see the censorship box at the bottom. You'll see the censorship tape over on the side. Palestine to Uruguay. Lots of pictorial stamps on that red censorship tape there, 1942, proper airmail rate, going through West Africa, going to Brazil, going to Trinidad, over to the recipient. Venezuela from Palestine, registered, going to Maracaibo in Venezuela, and once again, 1942. And this one written in Arabic in the inside. Now we're in Central America. There's the Canal Zone. Okay, Palestine to the Canal Zone, to Gatun in Central America, going on Alilatoria. Palestine to Costa Rica, going to San Jose. Lots of transit markings. You'll see it's going through New York. And where's it coming from? Bethlehem, you know, as a lot of mail did. Palestine to El Salvador, actually to San Salvador in El Salvador. And how did they get it there? Well, 1944, it went across Africa over to Miami, and then it went down to Texas. And then they went through Texas all the way by land into Central America. Palestine to Guatemala City, 1944, pictorial stamps, censorship tape on the side. Palestine to the Republic of Panama, postcard rate, receiving cancel in Cologne in the Republic of Panama is distinct from the Canal Zone. Canal Zone was administered by the United States, sovereign state for the Republic of Panama. And then 1939, airmail to the Republic of Panama, receiving cancels, pictorial stamps, censorship over on the side. Now we're in Asia. Palestine to Afghanistan, to Kandahar. I can tell you one thing, there sure was no mail from Israel to Kandahar because Afghanistan did not permit postal relations and never recognized Israel. So this was April 1947, probably one of the last letters ever to go from that area, namely Palestine, to Afghanistan. Palestine to Burma, which was part of British India, a UK crown colony. This was a first flight cover that went to Akyab from Gaza because there was a airmail facility or an airport facility in Gaza. Palestine to Ceylon, to the place you'll all be familiar with, Slave Island in Colombo, in Ceylon. I talked about the first stamps of Palestine right up in the top right corner. That's called the blue, or one of the blues. You know, this is 1 piastra, paying the foreign letter rate. March 1918, censored in Ceylon, censored in Palestine. Another letter going to Ceylon much later, pictorial stamps, 1940. It's the war, goes by airmail. Oh, where's it going through? Karachi. Because remember, Karachi was part of India. We didn't have Pakistan then. I can tell you there was no mail going from Israel to Karachi later, because Pakistan also didn't recognize Israel. So mail going from Palestine through Karachi is something that you only see during the Palestine period. Palestine to China. Okay, Sam, this is for you. So this goes to Jerusalem to Shanghai, registered in Jerusalem, receiving, registration cancel in Jerusalem, going through Port Said in Egypt. China from Palestine, going to Peking. All sorts of pictorial stamps were 1935. Ingo, you'll like this. It's transiting Hong Kong. There's a jusqu'à cancel on the airmail etiquette indicating that it was air only to Hong Kong. Now we're going to French Indochina from Palestine. And we're going to replicate the Vietnam War. First, we're going to go to Saigon. Okay, so here's pictorial stamps from the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. Beautiful corner piece on that. They couldn't find the person because there was no service to Saigon, so they sent it back to Palestine. Okay, now we're on the other side in the Vietnam War. We're going to Hanoi. And so here we are in northern French Indochina, which was the French colony. They couldn't find the person there either, and they had to return it. So you see a whole bunch of dead letter markings. And the dead letter offices, interesting, were in India, Madras, Bombay, you know, as opposed to it actually getting back to Palestine. Here we go, Hong Kong, Palestine to Hong Kong, May 2nd, 1919. There's the typograph stamps, the censorship markings, the censorship tape, Palestine through Egypt, and there's no receiving cancel, it looks like, but I'd stand corrected on that one. Second piece, Palestine to Hong Kong through Port Said in Egypt, but there is the receiving cancel in Hong Kong, 1920, and it was going to a customs house. There's a typograph stamp registered in Jerusalem. Third piece to Hong Kong, 1933. This is an entire that was used with the embossed registration postage on it that paid registration. And it's registered in Jaffa with transit markings through Palestine, Egypt, no receiving cancel. Fourth piece to Hong Kong, this is a beauty, 1941, during the war. Not delivered, postal communications suspended. There's censorship marking in Singapore. There is the censor tape on the side. There's the Palestine censors going by airmail through the horseshoe route, down through Africa and across. Palestine to India, to Calcutta, Jerusalem, 1926, over to Calcutta. There's the typograph stamps. It's transiting airmail until Baghdad, and then it surfaced from Baghdad all the way to India. There's the receiving mark inside Calcutta. Palestine to Korea. Remember, there was no Korea. Korea was annexed and ruled by Japan in this period in 1926. So you have Kinsen, Korea. You see Japanese markings on the covers. There's a receiving cancel in Hong Kong at the time. And there is a second piece with typograph stamps, with Japanese receipt markings going registered in Jaffa. Palestine to Siam, going in 1940 to Bangkok, censorship. It's in the middle of the war. There's the airmail markings. Palestine to Turkey. Now, a lot of you will say, Turkey's close to Palestine. It must have been common for mail to go there. And the answer is, this went to a little place. It went to the Princess Islands in Turkey, which is the reason why I put it in. 1921, a lot of you will know that the Ottoman Empire effectively fell, reconstituted as Turkey, 1922. And there's the typograph stamps there with receiving cancels. Finally, we're getting into Oceania. And you'll say, Oceania, I never learned that in school. You know, that was just a fun way for me to put a bunch of countries together. First one, Australia. Palestine to Australia. There were a lot of Australian soldiers that were fighting in the Egyptian Expeditionary Force in Palestine. This is August 1918 out of the Army Post Office in Jaffa. Lots of nice typograph stamps, huge envelope censored in Palestine going to Melbourne, Australia. Palestine to the Philippines. This was a hard one for me to find. Surface to the Philippines. And that's the postcard rate. Dutch East Indies. Palestine to Velterverden, to Java, you know, in the Dutch East Indies with a receiving cancel. Typograph stamps, postmarks out of Jaffa. Palestine to Java, once again, with pictorial stamps. This is going in 1933, early airmail. And KLM, if a lot of you may not know, serviced the Dutch East Indies because of the Dutch connection out of the Netherlands. Palestine to Fiji. Oh, look who it is on the cover. It's Harry Luke again. So now he's the head of Fiji. We had him in Malta. We had him in Sierra Leone. Now he's in Fiji. And by the way, for those of you who are wondering, I have no idea if he was a stamp collector. I think this was really government mail that was just being sent to him. So this is out of Jerusalem going to Fiji. Now we go to the Federated Malay States. And if I woke a bunch of you up at night and said, can you name me all the places in the Federated Malay States? I'm sure you would not win the Jeopardy prize, okay, in the circumstances to be able to answer it. I sure couldn't. But here's one, Palestine to the Federated Malay States in 1918. These are the blues, the first stamps of Palestine, going through some of the different transit markings, military post offices registered to the Federated Malay States. Now the Malayan Union. Palestine to the Malayan Union, which was a UK crown colony going to Perak. Then to Singapore. Palestine to Singapore, first flight cover from Gaza to Singapore, transit markings on the back. Palestine to the Straits settlements, going to Malaya, to Penang. They couldn't find the person. Pictorial stamps, 1940, this is 1947, and it goes to the debtor letter office in March of 48. Palestine to the Straits settlements, Singapore, this is the all-up rate. You see the cachet. The airmail collectors will know this one. Empire Airmail Scheme, 1938. Marshall Islands, here's where they are. How many of you have seen mail to the Marshall Islands, which was under US control? 1948 Palestine, postcard to the Marshall Islands, including a stamp of the Jewish National Fund, which was not supposed to be used on a postcard, you know, going abroad, because that was contrary to the UPU rules at the time. Palestine to New Zealand, to Dunedin, typograph stamps, registered. 1926, Palestine to Hastings, registered, going, excuse me, going in 1937. Lots of beautiful postage paying the appropriate rate, 5 times weight. And by the way, this was going from the winery in Palestine to New Zealand. Finally, at the end of our journey, we end in a place we'd all like to go. Tahiti, French colony, Palestine to Tahiti, 1947, proper postage, and we're done.
I think we're somewhat stunned by the extent of our world trip that we just went on, despite being locked in because of COVID. And on behalf of the Philatelic Specialist Society, Ed, I want to thank you for this tremendous expo on world covers, you know, the destination covers. Tremendous. The amount of history you had to delve into, and not just history, but postal history and postmarks and that sort of thing is fantastic to see. So on behalf of the PSSC, thank you ever so much.